As we continue our exploration of the strange, oddball laws that once governed 18th century France, let's turn our attention to something even more perplexing: dancing. Yes, you heard that right, dancing. You might think of Parisian ballrooms, where the waltz swept through the room with elegance, or perhaps the exuberant street dancers, free to move to their heart's desire. But back then, in certain parts of France, you couldn't just waltz your way through life. You needed permission. Historians still argue whether these laws were intended to maintain moral order or simply to keep the plebeian class under control. Either way, dancing wasn't something you could just do willy-nilly. Under the rule of King Louis XV, dancing became a strictly regulated activity. You couldn't just throw a party and expect people to break out into a spontaneous dance. Oh no, the authorities had their eyes on you. In 1740, a royal edict was passed which specifically required individuals to seek permission before holding public dances. To put it plainly, you couldn't cha-cha your way through life without a stamp of approval from the government. Imagine you're a French citizen in the 18th century. You've been planning the annual fête, the grand dance of the season, and you've been practicing your moves, your pirouettes and jetés, like crazy for weeks. But then, in the middle of all the excitement, you find out that before you can even step onto the dance floor, you must request permission from the authorities. A dance permit, for crying out loud. Sounds like a nightmare for anyone who loves a good, impromptu jig, right? Why was this such a big deal? Well, the monarchy was big on control, especially when it came to activities that could potentially bring people together in ways they didn't want. These dances weren't just about movement, they were about the social order. During the 18th century, public gatherings, including dances, could spark all sorts of trouble, especially if they weren't strictly monitored. Public dances often turned into hotbeds of political conversation or even rebellion. Imagine a room full of French commoners dancing together, uniting against the oppressive aristocracy. Terrifying, right? For the French government, this was the kind of gathering they wanted to avoid at all costs. A simple dance could become a political statement, a form of revolt in disguise. Historians still argue whether these dance laws were about controlling people or about trying to keep the aristocracy's social order intact. It was widely believed that an unregulated dance could lead to undisciplined behavior, things like flirtation, excessive merrymaking, and possibly even insurrection. And let's not forget, these dances were often mixed gatherings of men and women, which could cause a great deal of, well, let's just say disruption in the strictly gendered society of the time. Now, I'm not sure if the authorities were truly afraid that the waltz would start a revolution or if they just wanted to keep the masses in check with their well-behaved minuets, but either way, the dance laws were taken seriously. Authorities went so far as to issue fines for people who danced without the necessary permits. And, of course, if you were caught dancing without permission, you could be banned from participating in public events for a while, or even forced to attend a correctional dance class. Imagine that. The thought of being forced to learn how to behave in public as a punishment just for cutting loose on the dance floor sounds like something straight out of a comedy film. One of the quirks of these laws was that they didn't just apply to the common folk. Yes, even the upper classes had to be on their best behavior. Nobles could be just as easily punished for dancing without a permit, which certainly must have caused some eye rolls behind their carefully crafted fans. Still, these dance permits were yet another reminder that in 18th century France, life wasn't just about what you wanted to do, it was about what the government decided was best for you. Interestingly, it wasn't until the late 18th century that these dance regulations began to soften. As the French Revolution loomed closer, the idea of controlling public gatherings became less popular. Revolutionaries and commoners alike began to rebel against the systems that restricted their freedom, and dancing, along with other previously prohibited activities, became a symbol of defiance. It was as if, with every pirouette and leap, people were shaking off the weight of the monarchy's constraints. By the time the revolution was in full swing, dancing was no longer seen as something that needed a permit. It had become an act of rebellion, a way to express freedom, identity, and unity. Still, it's hard to ignore just how bizarre it must have been to live in a time when something as innocent as dancing required paperwork. It's not something we often think about when we imagine the carefree ballrooms of the past, but the reality was far more stifling than most of us would ever want to believe. Imagine walking into a ballroom in Paris in 1740 and being asked to present your dance license before you even stepped foot on the floor. Can you picture it? And yet, in a way, this was a small piece of the very foundation of the French Revolution. It's easy to laugh now, but in those days, a waltz was more than just a dance. It was a matter of control, power, and sometimes rebellion.